Start Game Fish and Parks Committee. Appreciate the members today. We've got two pieces of legislation that we're going to hear today. One of them is more of an introduction and an overview, and very, very important piece of legislation going forward for years to come with our hunters and fishermen. And that one we're going to save for the last one. But the first one, HB 840, and I'm going to go ahead and get Chairman Stevens, if you will, to come up. A very important bill. Many of us in the General Assembly work very hard to make Georgia not only a great place overall economically, but we've really focused in on the movie production industry, and it has indeed been good to Georgia. We have a lot of folks coming to Georgia to make their movies, but also with it, they're bringing their critters. And I think that's the major part of the bill. There is a committee sub, and I'll go ahead and point that out. If you'll look in your folders, we're going to be working off of the committee substitute LC 40-10061S, and the primary author of the bill, as far as the permitting process for the wildlife, is going to be Representative or Chairman Stevens. So I'll let him start with that, and then there's another piece in there, and we'll Chairman McCall, he should be here shortly. We'll let him take that. So with that, Chairman Stevens, please tell us about the bill. No, that would help.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of committee, you might remember a few years ago we tried to eliminate some barriers to business. We were having problems with getting some films on our beaches down in Jekyll Island, so we amended it to prevent this long, arduous process for permitting so that they could go down and do these films and be in, be out, and be gone, and have the beaches back in their pristine shape. This is very similar as well. This is another barrier to the business. We've got several film companies that are filming in Georgia that want to use the indigenous wildlife in their films. There's no mechanism to allow them to do that. And they're having to leave, many of them, 40 or 50 cases, to go outside the state and use these animals in their film. So what this does is it creates a permitting process for these film companies to do that. For an in-state process for these indigenous animals, it's a $300 annual fee. For a non-resident for this film production wildlife permit, it's $600. And this is a department bill, and Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'll ask the department to address.
Absolutely, that'll be great.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The bill, we currently have two types of wild captive animals in the state. One's wildlife, the indigenous species, and then wild animals, which are species not native to the state. We're currently, folks can possess these non-native species and use them in film. The ones that are the issue, though, are the native wildlife. And we're just asking for the ability to be able to use those under strict conditions, and the same conditions used for the wild animal with some additions to that.
Let me make sure. We're really, what I'm hearing, I know we had talked before, but we're trying to get ahead of this. In other words, this is more of a recent, with all of the movie production that is in Georgia. We really haven't tackled this issue before. This hasn't been a huge issue up until in recent times. So what we're trying to do is get a permitting system in here, or this process in here, so that you guys can get a hold of it. Make sure that the animals that are being used are used correctly, and make sure that those folks that are the trainers or the owners, that they're making sure these animals are protected, they're taken care of properly. Is that?
Do. It's a dual permitting system. All these animals would have to be duly permitted between our office and offices like the USDA or U.S. Fish and Wildlife, whoever has other authority over that particular species. So it's a twofold inspection and permitting process.
Okay. Members of the committee, any questions or comments for Chairman Stevens or Officer Hubbard about this process, what we're doing? Representative.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I asked this question when we did the DNR listening session at Charlie Elliott Wildlife Center. Down here in, I guess this is Section 4, B. Says it shall be unlawful for any person holding any wildlife in captivity pursuant to a permit issued in accordance Code Section Wildlife to release from captivity or a house or maintain. And I asked the question, I have a couple of friends that do raptors, where they take red-tailed hawks and use them for hunting and for sport. Well, they're required to release those back into the wild. And if somehow they were able to get a permit to use these in a production, the law says they're not allowed to release that back into captivity. Does that make sense? Kind of what the question I was asking?
Yes, sir, it does. And that's one of those situations where that's a U.S. Fish and Wildlife permit. They set the rules as far as what those folks can do with a federally protected bird like that. The ones that you're speaking of are falconry birds, and it's a sport, a hunting license and a permit that they go through, and they can keep those birds long term, or a lot of them will catch a bird and use it that season and let it go and catch another one for the next year. So it's a different type of situation.
Representative Luricki, and I think was it 2 years ago maybe that we actually the feds were divesting themselves of the falconry, the oversight, and we actually at the state level are doing that. So I think it is a separate than what we're looking at here as far as this particular permitting process. Any other questions for the author? I do want to point, and you can stay there for a second. I'm going to let Chairman McCall talk about the next section of the bill. Mr. Chairman, I think we had a little bit of a cleanup that was coming from last year regarding these, I don't know what you call them, big rats, pests that are decimating Georgia. But would you explain that section that's in here regarding this cleanup that we need?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was tied up with a guy wanting to pontificate about horse racing a while ago. The reason I was a little late. If you look at Section 2 on line 22 of the substitute, and I appreciate Chairman Stevens for letting us put this language in his bill so we don't have to do a standalone and run it through the whole process. The stricken through language was the definition of a feral hog that we put in the feral hog bill last year. Evidently, it is not enforceable by the game wardens whenever they stop some guy with a suspect hog in the back of the truck that he's not supposed to be transporting. So DNR has come up with the new language, which is the underlying part, which will help them be able to hold or prosecute or do whatever they need to do with some guy that's breaking the law as far as feral hogs go. And I don't care what they do as long as they get rid of them. So I would like to, and I've talked to Chairman Stevens and Chairman Knight about just adding this in because it kind of fits into this language in the way that we're talking about. And that will save me from having to do a bill and save DNR from having to fool with language that doesn't work that we put in there last year. So that's okay.
Any questions for Chairman McCall on that? And guys, the other part of the last part of the bill that you'll see in here is many of you who have been here a while, we have to officially adopt the rules and regs that are set by the DNR board. And I don't know, Commissioner or Director Forrester, if y'all want to comment, but again, this is routine. As y'all know, our DNR board regularly makes rules and regs, and this body adopts them. So if you'll see in the two parts of the bill, it's the date changes there. Section 3 and in Section 1, you'll see it scratched through 2013, and you'll see on the second page the 2015. They're both filled in with 2016. I think what this is doing is making sure that we're updating the law. We're recognizing these rules and regs that are promulgated by our DNR board, and that is now in effect as of January 1/16. So if there's any questions regarding that part, but that is more of a housekeeping provision that we do regularly in this committee. Any questions? Yes. All right.
I was just wanting to make sure that, does this apply to somebody that's wanting to go out and just film their hunt, like a quail hunt or something like that? They're not only subject to this fee, are they?
Free range and wild animals, if they want to video that and they have the correct
Yeah, but these
hunting
quails
license.
didn't always live out in the wild sometimes.
Yes. No, this is strictly to deal with wild animals which you can't possess any other way.
Okay. I was just wanting to clarify that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Uh-oh, sorry about
I'm
that.
sorry. I would really appreciate your favorable consideration on this for this one reason. And we're relatively new into the film business. This year we're going to do more films in Georgia than California. That's a pretty big deal. So these things that we run across, I would deeply appreciate your consideration in keeping this industry thriving so that they don't have to go 40 or 50 times out of the state.
Members of the committee, are there any other discussions on the substitute for House Bill 840? We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. And we have a due pass. Thank you, Chairman Stevens, and we'll report this committee sub out as a due pass. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I know. You can't stay out of trouble. I just hope you were. I hope you got out of the doghouse at home. You were in sort of the hot spot at the house, I understand, the other week.
If you want to dim the lights and off the festival,
Well,
you kind of just started off wrong.
well, I mean, you said you're in the hot seat all the time. Guys, this is, I tell you what, this bill is probably one of the most important bills that we've had come through, not only this committee, but is probably of grave importance to the hunting and fishing community and family that we've seen in a long time. And as we start, I want to give you. I'm gonna let Representative Nimmer and Mark and Whitney and the commissioner and make some comments if they will. But I want to give a little background. This is a licensing bill, and this is talking about increasing the fees in the state of Georgia. But this bill is very important because we are a little bit different. Our hunters and fishermen, basically pay their way. And as y'all know, the economic impact that we, and I'm a hunter, and I say this, as a fisherman, an angler, and a hunter, we have a tremendous impact on the state of Georgia economically. I mean, it's y'all have heard the term or the figures, $5 million a day is spent in Georgia. The taxes that we contribute, I'm sorry I had some of this data at my hands, but now I'm getting too much data. That may be it right there. And these are figures that are 11 figures, but in state and local taxes alone, hunters and fishermen contribute $216 million a year. And these are probably a little low because they're a few years old. We provide about $1.2 billion in salaries and wages, and there's a huge ripple effect. When you think about the economics and tourism and what we do, and it's all because we as hunters and fishermen are pursuing a passion, a tradition, something that we love very much. And as such, the funding traditionally has, we have borne the cost of making sure that we're keeping our resources together. As you know, our hunting and fishing license, we pay for that as hunters and fishermen, and it's got to go back into the resource. Because of not necessarily a constitutional amendment, but for the fact that we've got those federal grants, and you've often heard many times you've heard the Pittman-Robertson or the Dingell-Johnson Acts. Those are those federal grants that we as hunter and fishermen, the excise tax that we pay on our sporting equipment, hunting, fishing, that goes up to the federal and then is allocated back down to the state. So we truly are very unique in the sense that we're paying our own way. And I think this is a very important bill. Over the years, we've seen the need for more resources out there to support the hunters and fishermen and those resources that are keeping our wildlife, in great shape, supporting our rangers, supporting a whole host, our fisheries. And what this bill is I think it's the culmination, and I'll let them talk a little bit more, but there was a public comment period, stakeholder comments, where all along the state, our DNR went around and heard from the different, all our hunters and fishermen, our conservation organizations. And I think this is sort of coming together at the end of what they heard. But I wanted to make sure that the committee understood that this is just not a bill coming out of the blue. This has been out there. So with that, Representative Nimmer, what I want to do today is let you go through the bill at a 50,000-foot level, so to speak. We'll start asking a few questions, but we're going to, in the end, we're going to put this in a subcommittee where we can look at it in more detail and do some work. But with that, Representative Nimmer, if you will, go for it.
You say go for it?
Go for it.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. House Bill 872, and Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the introduction to the bill and the importance of it. I'm just going to throw an air of caution out, as you all may have the initial, as we call it, knee-jerk reaction to this bill. I wasn't a fan of the intent of the bill until I got in and started thinking about long-term preservation of our wildlife resources in the state of Georgia. The chairman alluded to the fact that hunters fund what they do. They pay their own way. And when somebody that's ponying up their money says, hey, I'll pay more if we can get a better service out of it, more service out of it, a long-term goal out of this, so that my children, my grandchildren, my great-grands can enjoy what I do, I think it's something that we owe them the responsibility to sit down around this table like we are and having a conversation. Mr. Chairman, I know you've already told me that today you just want to get the bill introduced, assigned to subcommittee, and start fleshing it out line by line and vetting this thing very good, so that we know that we're ensuring long-term preservation and making sure that the monies are going where they need to go. And I think that's what we owe the people of Georgia and the resources that we're managing in this bill. I will tell you that I've talked to folks down on the coast. I've talked to the actual fishermen. I've talked to the ones that go out there and back their boat in, gas their boat up, pay their annual registration fees, buy their lures, and go out into the coast and into the inland waterways, and they fish, and they come out, and they abide by whatever rules we have in front of them. I've sent the bill down to them, and I'm talking about Representative Spencer, the folks that show up at the coastal meetings when we have an issue down there and have a town hall. And if you've never been to one of those, they don't mind expressing their opinion, do they? And I think our friends behind me with DNR, they've been in the middle of those before, and they can be very emotional and passionate. And when those guys came back to me and said, you know what, we like what the intent is, and we want to support y'all going forward. they want to be a part of this conversation. I think that's what our responsibility is to them. So I want you to know I've covered myself on that. I went to the hunters on the inland side, get off the boat and on the farm, the bird shooters, the wing hunters, so to speak, the large animal hunters, the hog and the deer, Mr. Chairman McCall, that I know that you cherish that resource so much, and I want to make sure that the deer herds stay healthy in Georgia. And they too say the same thing. It's consistent from water to land. We're willing to pay more. We want to pay more. They never once said that, you know what, I don't want to look at the scale, but we put it in front of them. I think there was there 8 listening sessions, I believe, around the state. Currently, right now, we're at $9 for fishing license, $10 for hunting license, and the annual big game, which covers your deer, bear, and turkey, are $19. The average, we're way below, more than half below the southeastern average. We're not talking about a nationwide. I'm talking about southeastern, something that's representative of what we're talking about. And we're just looking to go up somewhere in the midstream, have a revenue source to come in and dedicate those funds to the DNR and their wildlife resources and all the efforts they have there to make sure that those monies are going to exactly what Chairman Knight alluded to, this long-term goal and responsibility that we each one have. I've not talked to DNR about this, and I may get, is he sitting right behind me? Okay, I did have one amendment I wanted to put in the bill, and I've not had a chance to talk to the commissioner about this yet, but I wanted to kind of change the turkey season a little bit. I want to increase the duck limit, and I'd like to see everybody in the 912 area code get a free pass on their hunting license. But other than that, no, I have no amendments to the bill. Mr. Chairman, the bill streamlines some licensing. It does away with WMA stamps and provisions. It streamlines some of our hip waterfowl, our big game, fishing, and everything. It generates revenue. That's why we're taking this measure up in the House, and I think this is the right place to take this measure up. And you know, for the sake of time, Mr. Chairman, I know we've got some professionals from the department here. I know we're going to go through this thing very thorough in subcommittee, and I'll be glad to take a question or listen to concerns at this time if that's your will, sir.
Well, if we've got a professional sitting next to you, if
We do.
Mark, thank you.
I'm not sure how to take that, Mr. Chairman, but thank you very much for recognizing me.
But anything you add, a 60,000-foot level, I know we've spoken of this, you know, we're streamlining some things. We're putting license together. This is trying to also not only from a point of view of add resources in to our departments that are overseeing and help manage our wildlife and fisheries, but I think we're combining license. We're doing some things that may make it easier also in this process, simplifying some of the license. Anything like that, and a general comment that, you know, about the bill that you may be able to add to Representative Nimmer's comments?
Yeah, just real quickly then, and I will keep it simple. I mean, we really had some specific goals when we started having this conversation with hunters and anglers across the state. We were really interested in making sure that they could understand license purchases easier. In other words, making their decisions simpler whenever they went online to try to figure out. So in that respect, we have combined some privileges with one purchase, and we also have eliminated the need to purchase some specific licenses. Representative Nimmer mentioned the wildlife management area and public fishing area. So we wanted to simplify purchase decisions. We also wanted to be sure that if there were support for an increase, that the amount that we were increasing would be supported. And so our objective was to stay somewhere midstream, as Representative Nimmer said. We've done that in every case. In most cases, we've been a little bit below. Interesting to find out that of all these public meetings and the surveys we conducted online, 9 out of 10 of the people that we talked to or responded to those were in favor of this increase. Now, of course, they understand that those funds do come back to the Department for Wildlife Conservation, so it pays right directly into the types of things that they're interested in. But we wanted to make those decisions easier. We didn't want to overburden people. But let's face it, if you stack up Georgia's resources, our hunting and angling in this state, with our southeastern neighbors, we're above average. But we still have below average prices, and so we've tried to stick very good to that word. We've done some other things. We are trying to access the federal dollars that are currently on the table that we can't access through a process we call certification. And what that means is that if you can identify an individual who purchased a license, you can count him as part of your pool, and the amount of money you get back from the federal government comes back to you that way.
And I think, Mark, just make sure everybody understands that. And you've seen bills over the years as we've messed with, the license. Okay, again, that goes to the formula of how the federal grants are divvied up and sent back to the state. I just want to make sure. I'm pretty sure that's what you're alluding to, and I want to make sure we stress the importance of that to the committee, because we want our resources. Those hunters and fishermen, we're paying for it because we bought the goods, fishing and hunting. Those dollars went up to the feds, and they're to be allocated back down to the states to put back in the resources. Those are the PR and DJ dollars.
Yes, sir. And so when we explain that to those of our constituents who currently receive free privileges, like those who are over 65 years of age, and for a youth who are less than 16 years of age. And we posed options out there about how we may be able to, for a very minimal fee, capture some of those people and count them every year, thus bringing back more dollars for conservation. We got tremendous support for those efforts as well. So when you see some of those changes in the bill, understand that we had those conversations. It is directed at trying to capture federal dollars and not really increase state revenues much, but they meet our certification requirements, the rules that are given to us by the feds about how we can count. And the same effect happened in our lifetime license prices. You'll see increases there as well. And that is to meet the federal rules related to someone who purchased a lifetime license and how you can count them throughout their entire life. So that's really big picture, and certainly a lot of details in here. I would tell you it's a lengthy bill. It's 21 pages long, but everything we've done in here essentially for decision making on the part of the person who has to partake of purchasing a license, it comes out easier in the end through our electronic system.
Members of the committee, again, I don't want to get into the weeds, but I would, questions, and so we can get this thought process going as we get this bill in subcommittee. Any questions to ask the author or our professionals, if you will?
If I could, and to hunt on WMA, you'll just buy a hunting big game license if you're going to deer hunt. Is that correct?
Currently, for big game hunting, you need the basic license as well as the big game. But yes, that's incorporated into not just your hunting license, but it's also incorporated into your fishing license as well. It gives you access.
How much WMA usage is there for other things than hunting and or fishing, like spelunkers, speedunkers, and hikers and bird watchers and cyclists? And
a great question. That demand is increasing. I can't put a particular number on it because we have multiple access points on 102 WMAs across the state. It's impossible to count. But in particular for spelunking and climbing rocks, the poster child would be Crockford Pigeon Mountain in northwest Georgia. Yeah. And there's a little over 200,000 people visit that every year, and only 5,000 of them are hunters. So that
do you have any idea what the enforcement cost of those type activities are versus hunting? Would we have any idea? Is there much enforcement cost through your wardens or managers?
The law enforcement division now, when it became a separate division, took over responsibility for enforcement on our state-owned land. So there is a law enforcement cost associated with that. No different than the cost, because a ranger costs what a ranger is.
Yeah.
But I would defer that to Colonel Henderson as
Okay.
far as what the costs are.
I just wondered if we had that somewhere. Maybe we can do that later. Okay. Now, my question is if any of this is funded through license, and if it is funded through license, these other users that are growing, of course, we want them to use them. They don't pay any fee or share the cost in any of that in cost of the management area, I guess. Maybe maybe it's not the time to talk about it.
Well, no, currently we have 32 areas that we know are high use for other than hunters and anglers, and they are required to purchase what we call a Georgia Outdoor Recreation Pass.
That's what I should have just asked that question.
What this bill does, though, actually, there is an increase to the Outdoor Recreation Pass. It turns out to be cheaper to purchase a hunting license, which allows you that access, which then allows us to capture the federal dollars that are left on the table.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Representative Spencer.
Thank you. Two questions, and I don't want to get into the weeds. But first question is sort of general. If this bill were to pass today as is unchanged, what's the total revenue that is expected to generate? That's the first question.
It's about 10 million.
10 million. Okay. Second one's kind of a little bit into weeds, and I'll limit it to one question. I noticed a lot of references to seafood dealers, crabbers in terms of trawlers. I noticed on section 17 at 647 line, are we striking the policy to be able to transfer
What
crab
line,
trap?
Representative?
647, 647, page 19. And at this, there's a big strikeout paragraph there. Are we getting rid of the policy of being able to transfer that? What are we doing there?
Actually, there is another code section in which it is already stated that that those licenses are non-transferable. What this is doing is eliminating conflicting language that got missed the first time around.
Okay.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One question. In Section 7, starting with line 263, could you kind of expand and expound on this edit concerning veterans, paralyzed and or disabled veterans?
Yes, sir, I'd be happy to.
Section 7, starting at line 263.
What this does is there is currently a practice within the department whereby we authorize those that are having wounded warrior type fishing events to allow our wounded veterans to participate in those without having to purchase a license. This actually explicitly defines that authority. So what we are doing is we are making it clear that the department actually does have the authority to do so.
Okay. Thank you.
Chairman McCall.
On line 435, and I'm just asking because I'm too dumb to know, is a dove considered a migratory bird?
Yeah.
And if so, why are we striking waterfowl and adding migratory birds in that license? I don't care, I'm just asking.
No, it's a great question. In fact, doves are a migratory bird. The reason we're striking that, this is one of the areas in which we combined privileges or required permits or licenses.
Okay.
We used to have a Georgia waterfowl license, and we also had a HIP, what was called the Harvest Information Program, Federal Migratory Bird License requirement. We have combined those now into the Georgia Migratory Bird License for one fee.
So if a person is hunting in a dove field on his own land, he's now got to get some sort of a license.
That's correct. He currently already had, whether he was hunting on his own land, he still had to have the Harvest Information Program permit. Now, what we have included in
Chairman McCall, I believe that was a question about
what we have done is we have also made a Georgia migratory bird landowner permit, which is still free of charge. So if you are a landowner, you're not purchasing that permit. It's only if you're hunting on land other than your own.
That hypothetical. Chairman McCall, that's a great question, and I think you're seeing this in several just the questions here that there has been a lot of thought that has gone into this to make sure that we're simplifying. I know I've been to other states, and you go to the other DNR websites to go buy a license, and it's a complicated mess. Okay, so I think there has been a lot of thought by our folks in WRD to look at this and make sure that we're simplifying. So I think we're going to find that out. But these are great questions, and that's why I wanted us to have a 60,000-foot discussion today so we can start thinking about what's in this bill, why have they done what they've done. Not only as we want to add new resources into our wildlife and fisheries, but are we making it easier for our sportsmen and women out there to participate? So, Representative LaRicchia.
How long has it been since we have reviewed all of these fees and actually done anything in regards to adjusting them?
24 years.
And I think it's important that we remind people, because like Representative Nimmer said, these are people that pay their own way, that work hard, that that invest a lot back. But it's just important that we remind people how many years it's been that we've been under that current fee.
Representative LaRicchia, Mr. Chairman, if I may, on that point, this is a clear response to the department and their professionals to try to put some rewrite together based on, you take an organization like Georgia Hunting and Fishing Federation, overwhelmingly their membership across the state of Georgia said, we're behind you 100%. We want to see this go through the process and see a good product come out. They are of the belief that we've got a good product going in, but they know the process up here as well. They want to see us go through it. They know 24 years has been too long to keep us to where we can have, as Chairman Knight alluded to in his opening remarks, a long-term preservation goal for our wildlife resource in the state. So.
Questions, committee? And I want to share this not only with the committee and Representative Nimmer over here. I've shared this with many of our folks in DNR, but I'm a signer on this bill, and I've heard what our hunters and fishermen all over the state have said. They want more. They pay their way, but they also want to make sure we go through this bill. They want to make sure, just like Representative Nimmer said, it's a good product. It makes sense, but they also want to make sure we're going to put the money where it should be, okay? And I've made a commitment. In fact, Representative Nimmer, I hope I'm not out of line in saying this. We made a commitment that if it doesn't go to the right place, we won't move this forward, or we'll wait to make sure that we've got that commitment that we're going to do the right thing for the men and women who are saying, hey, we're willing to volunteer more of our resources to put back into our wildlife and fisheries. And I want to make that commitment today. And I want all of the people on this committee to, I hope, will adopt that same philosophy. And I know Representative Nimmer and I have made a commitment to each other.
Yep.
If it's not right,
Mr. Chairman, and that level of commitment we made to each other is why I begged and begged for this bill to come to your committee. They wanted it in Chairman McCall's, but all I knew we'd hear is shoot more deer.
And hogs.
So I begged for it to come here so it'd be handled right.
Chairman McCall.
Oh, Lord, I was trying to help you out, man. Is it not semi-true that if the last time we did this, that
that
we
a partial
raised
truth?
any fees was 24 years ago, and if you figure in inflation and take into consideration the price of gas, what it was then and what it is now, they're getting a better deal today off of these fee increases than they actually had 24 years ago as far as the price of a license.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, that is true. And I think, again, that's why you see the overwhelming support of your hunters and fishermen in the state and the federations that represent them and the department and hopefully the well-vetted process of this committee. I think that's why there's not a lot of heartburn sitting here, just the anticipation to get in there and make sure we do turn out a good, sound product that we can go back home and let our folks that are, as Chairman Knight said, paying their own way, be proud of.
And this ain't an election year tax increase, because they're getting a better deal now than they were.
Well said.
I'm not sure the media would understand it well enough to know it, but real quick, and I know we're running out of time, but I you know, we've talked about the work that's going on over the interim, the public comment. We've heard from our department, Representative Nimmer, but one of the things I want to make sure today is that y'all know this is going to be done in an open and public way, because our partners, I say our partners, I'm a hunter and fisherman, and the rest of us, I know most of us are. But I want to hear today, I know I see out folks who've traveled up here for this. I want anybody that's got comment, our conservation partners out there, the folks who are representing any of our hunting and fishing associations are out there. I want to hear from you, because I want to also make sure that what Representative Nimmer has said and the comments have been made about the the interim and the public comment period, what y'all think, because I want y'all to talk to the committee, and this is all seriousness. So with that, Representative Nimmer, if y'all will, let's let some of our folks that have come today come up and talk. There's no sign-up sheet, but Mike Worley from Wildlife Federation, if you will, come up, and anybody else. I don't know how many other folks are out there that are representing, but as soon as we get through, Mike gets through, I'm going to ask y'all all to make sure that you have an opportunity to come here and talk about this proposal on the table. Mike, if you'll identify yourself and.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to speak to the group today. I represent the Georgia Wildlife Federation. We're the state's oldest and largest member-supported conservation group. We've been around since 1936, and we are really. I first want to say how much we appreciate the work that the department has done on this issue with holding the public hearings. We were a partner and sponsored those public hearings out there around the state. It really has been a public process. And as we have gone through this process and talked about these issues, we've talked about the needs that the department has, but the needs that the hunters and fishermen have too. And that's really the group that I'm here to represent today. So we want to just go on record with you in saying that we support absolutely this process. We support the concept of increasing these hunting and fishing license fees. One of the things that we do get feedback from our hunters and fishermen, though, is to ensure that these dollars do indeed benefit those people that are paying those dollars. The hunters, fishermen, outdoor enthusiasts that we represent, it's critical that they see the benefit to raising these fees, whether it's continuing to opening our public fishing areas 7 days a week now instead of the 2 days where we're having to close them. So we truly want to go on record saying that we appreciate you, Representative Nimmer, in sponsoring this bill and what you've done and the work that you put into making this a reality. Appreciate all of you as committee members, and we stand ready to help in any process as you move forward in ensuring that we make this a very successful endeavor. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Mike. Next. And again, if you'll identify yourself and who you're with.
My name is Dutch Earl, and I represent Trout Unlimited for the state of Georgia. We have over 4,000 members across the state. And first and foremost, Trout Unlimited is a cold water conservation organization. We do a lot of stream restoration projects. We work with youth and work with wounded warriors for education and other related activities, and have quite an active organization here in Georgia. It amazes me as I reflect. I've been in Georgia for 20-some years, and I was originally from Pennsylvania and spent a lot of time in New Jersey. And I thought we had good facilities or good resources up there for hunting and fishing. They don't compare to what we have here in Georgia. One of the best kept secrets within our entire state is the Chattahoochee just running right through the city of Atlanta. That's fantastic. It's hard to believe through our efforts collectively in this state, we have naturally reproducing brown trout in the Chattahoochee since 2006. They haven't stocked it since then, and some wonderful fishing, plus all the rainbows that are put into the river on a regular basis. Bottom line, we're in favor of raising the hunting and fishing license fees, and think it's a good idea, with the understanding that it goes for continuing, with the understanding that the additional funding goes for continuing our efforts in conservation and wildlife habitat, and also for our hatcheries throughout the state. And as I said, I represent over 4,000 members of Trout Unlimited throughout Georgia, and we'd like to see this happen, and we'd like to see our good resources continue.
Any question? Thank you. I don't think people realize that Georgia is a very diverse state, all the way from the coast all the way up to the mountains, and certainly with Chattahoochee River. But we have a pretty good fishery as far as our trout, and someone who loves to fly fish, I certainly appreciate it. Next, anybody else in the?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Brooks Binder, and I'm here on behalf of the Coastal Conservation Association. So we're the saltwater anglers that you guys have been talking about. And just want to go on the record saying that we also fully support the intent behind this bill. But I want to echo, for example, what Mike Worley said. We care about where this money goes. We want to make sure that it's going back to the users, the hunters, the fishermen, making sure that this is supporting our resources and preserving our conservation efforts. But on behalf of CCA, I want to say thank you for your efforts, and we look forward to watching this process develop. Thank you.
Thank you. I know we got some more folks. Les?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Les Ager. I'm just an average hunter and fisherman with a little different than average background. I worked for DNR for better than 30 years and have been watching natural resources issues in our state now for over 40 years. And if it would be helpful, I've made written copies of my comments that I'd be happy for you to distribute after I'm finished. I certainly support the concept of sportsmen paying for conserving natural resources. Georgia sportsmen have a long history of doing so. However, looking back on the history of the General Assembly in implementing and appropriating license fees, I'm troubled by House Bill 872. I will remind you that in 1992 was the last time licenses were increased. And the reason for that license increase was to buy conservation land for Georgia. Sportsmen really supported it overwhelmingly, and they were promised that as soon as the bonds were paid off that purchased all that land, those license increases would be rolled back. And in 2009, that license fee increase was so great that they retired those bonds 3.5 years early, so that in 2009 fees should have been rolled back. but they were not. And the $3.5 million that license fee increased state revenue should have gone into the department's budget for management of fish and wildlife, but it did not. The budget after that 2009 period was actually cut. Also in 2009, there was another license increase on non-resident hunters. Nobody particularly likes non-resident hunters because they don't vote, so it's a handy target. And we raised, I believe, somewhere in the neighborhood of $2.6 million with that license fee increase in 2009. And again, the sportsmen saw no increase. In fact, there was a decrease in state appropriations to the Wildlife Resources Division after that license increase. Don't be surprised at my skepticism that the $10 million you propose to raise with this license increase will simply evaporate into the pot that is the general fund in the state budget. The Wildlife Resources Division budget currently is about 68% sportsmen's dollars that are either license fees or federal funds. The other 30% or so is general appropriations from other sources, state sales tax being one of them. As long as that situation exists, it's quite easy for a license dollar that comes into the WRD budget to simply be negated by the withdrawal of some general funds. So I'm very concerned that this bill will simply provide a feeling that sportsmen have contributed to the program with no actual increase to wildlife programs. And I think some method needs to be introduced, some assurances need to be made that over the long haul, the license increase money that results from this increase is directed towards programs that improve hunting and fishing in Georgia. And only in WRD are those programs present. So there's no other department other than WRD that this license money should be used in. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions? Representative Nimmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want
Representative Nimmer. Are you going to ask a question of Les or?
Yeah, I'm
okay.
sorry. I thought.
Les, do you mind answering?
I don't mind answering a question. Someone else had asked about written comments.
Oh, yeah. And
you want me to pass
please,
them around? Okay.
We'll pass those down.
They're somewhat more extensive. They may answer the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to tell you thank you for bringing that concern up, and I want to assure you that that's part of the process that Chairman Knight and I alluded to very thoroughly. That skepticism that's out there from people with reason is why we are taking such a careful approach to this bill. And I appreciate your comments, and they're well received. I want you to understand that.
Well, thank you, and I not sure I understood the question, but
it's not a question. I'm not asking a question. I'm making a comment to you. A lot of times when people come before a committee voicing opposition to a measure, they can be guarded at times. I mean, that's just the way it is, and I just want to tell you I appreciate the fact that you've got your ducks in a row, for a lack of better terms, and that you're making sure that we keep the amount of caution that we made a commitment to one another and to the people of Georgia about. And I would anticipate that you would be monitoring the movement of this bill through the process, and I would invite you to please reach out to me, as I'm going to be a hands-on with this thing through the entire way, to keep me posted on what you see.
I've got a vacancy for a best friend. I'd be happy to put you on the list.
I haven't been anybody's best friend in 39 years.
It may improve both our reputations.
And he's still in trouble at home. He's still in trouble at the house.
Are you right?
All right. I know we got some more. Les, thank you. And look, guys, this is why we're here. We're hearing from the people who, good gracious, this thing is echoing. We will, but that's why we're hearing from folks. They're saying, guys, we want to do this. Just make sure you're doing it right. We're adding resources, and down the road, you're not going to backdoors. So that's you're hearing from the hunters and fishermen. So, Representative LaRicchia.
I echo what Representative Nimmer said, but I'm from down in deep rural South Georgia. I'm from almost as far south in Georgia as you can go, with the exception of Representative Corbett. But the confidence that I have in this revenue doing what we want it to do and what the hunters expect it to do, the confidence that I have in it is sitting right behind you. I remember when Commissioner Williams was selected to take over, I remember thinking to myself, with all due respect to former commissioners, we got us a hunter and fisherman in the spot, and being a hunter and fisherman, I can tell you that the law enforcement group and the commissioner and deputy commissioner, man, we have seen unbelievable changes in the area of how they put resources back into trout, coastal, wildlife management areas. And under the one thing you didn't mention, from about 2006 to 2011 was the economic crunch that these guys fell under, that cut millions of dollars out of these budgets. But thank you again so much for bringing this to our attention, and I'm going to help them make sure that and the commissioner, and we put this money exactly where it needs to go.
Well, thank you. And one little known fact is that the economic downturn didn't affect hunters and anglers. If you look at license sales, participation in hunting and fishing and boating, that did not decline during the economic downturn. And to put it another way, boaters and fishermen and hunters continue to pay at the same rate they always have for services during the economic downturn. Yet their programs were cut drastically during the past 6 years or so. So I'm sorry that I don't share your optimism.
Well,
if we look at the past track record of the past 5 or 6 years, the WRD budget has really suffered dramatically, and there are places where I used to be able to go fish on Monday morning that I can't go anymore because DNR's budget's been cut and those areas are closed on Monday mornings, Tuesday mornings. They're only open 5 days a week now. So I want to see us improve and get back not only where we were before the economic downturn occurred, but I think we could do much better than that.
Thank you. Representative Spencer. And again, we're here. I asked you questions and comments, but we're just trying to hear from the community. Go ahead.
I guess this question may be for Commissioner, maybe anyone on this committee that can answer it. Do we require audits and accounts to review the licensing intake revenues and audit that? Is that part of the process?
Yes.
Okay.
Les, thank you. And I know we've got some more members of the hunting and fishing, but anybody, I mean, if you have it, and yes.
Mr. Chairman, William Woodall with the Georgia Hunting and Fishing Federation. I reiterate what Chairman Nimmer said. Our membership overwhelmingly supports this act. And another thing I'll say is we went ahead and did our own internal poll on this, and we polled registered and likely voters. And what we found out is over 60% supported this measure. And these aren't hunters. These are just regular Joes out in the state. But when we added to the fact that we looked in and saw that some of our counties don't have law enforcement in the state of Georgia, we added that into it if some of that money went to law enforcement to increase those numbers of law enforcement in those counties that were underserved. The number went over 70%. So as a hunter and a fisherman, I'll be glad to pay my extra fee because I hope we get more guys that are out there on the line helping us when we're out there hunting in the woods. Any questions, I'll take them. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Committee, thanks for your time today. My name is Dave Waymer. I represent the Georgia chapter of the National Wild Turkey Federation. We participated in the public hearings, if you've heard about today, from WRD across the state, as well as polling members of our 60 chapters across the state and our close to 7,000 members that we have now. I'll echo most of what you've heard today. Hunters are not afraid to carry the load on our shoulders. However, we are concerned about the burden of, is that money going to be appropriated to the correct places? We are concerned that possibly this money get taken from their budget from the general fund and replaced with these monies. So that same sentiment that you've heard from Mr. Ager and others continues across our core membership as well. The other things, questions that came up in our discussions were, what is the plan for this money? Does this add to additional biologists in the state? Does it add to additional law enforcement rangers in counties that don't have them? What is the plan? If we're asking for $10 million, where's that $10 million going? Will it be part of a land acquisition program so that our grandchildren and grandchildren will be able to enjoy the great opportunities to hunt and fish here in the state of Georgia? We don't know. That's the questions that we have. We appreciate you listening to us and wish you the best in this tough challenge and decisions that you have to make. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner, you got any? I'd like to recognize the commissioner because this is well. And I save the best. I always save the best for last. But what are you saying about our commissioner? No, this is a serious matter, Commissioner, and it's a lot of responsibility. I know we in this room are hunters and fishermen, and I want to hear from my guy that's leading this charge. So, Commissioner.
We tried to do over the past years, go to the public, explain our story to them, and listen to them. Our town hall meetings were not these slideshows where you put everybody and you go through it. We had stations where they could learn about what our different departments do. Great feedback. Dan and his team did a great job. I used to sit where you sit as a former legislator, so I know when you see fee increases and these increases, what it does to a legislator. So I gave Dan a simple task. I want them to be able to go back to their hunters and their hunters say, we want this. Not, guys, I'm going up here to vote on this. That was our goal. And we had some great results. Some of your major local media carried our meetings. Our great Sportsman's Magazine out there, GON, followed it as well with us. I get on blogs. I don't blog, but I get on them and read them to stay in touch. And as y'all know, I'm a hunter and fisherman. I'm not going to be commissioner forever. I'm going to have to live under these same fees. And if there's anything, all my friends hunt and fish, all of them. I don't hang out with golfers and poker players and all that. They hunt and fish. And so I have to answer to them just like you do as the commissioner. And in subcommittee, we'll be able to lay out some programs. We've got to increase capacity. Over these years, we've picked up a ton of acreage through the bonding, the tens of thousands of acres since we've had an increase, and still doing it with the same level of personnel. And that includes our law enforcement rangers and our wildlife techs and biologists. And so increasing capacity on a lot of levels is going to be paramount with this bill. Customer expectations, as you know, as elected officials, you have customer expectations on every facet. I just have them on the hunting, fishing, conservation, but they're increasing every day. And so we want to be, for example, as Les brought up, I want to open the PFAs back 7 days a week. I want to offer night fishing, maybe even camping at our PFAs, increase boat ramps, and on, more food plots, more gates. I got 47 counties without a game warden right now. I know you hear these from your constituents, and we want to be responsive, but we want to be very transparent. In my tenure as commissioner, y'all have been great at funding me back completely for license sales, and sometimes I dare say a little more. But I agree with us going into subcommittee and answering those questions for our constituents because they'll be watching. Before I was even elected, I used to say as a hunter, you can double my license, but I want to know where the money's going. So everybody agrees with that statement, and we'll get into it and look forward to it.
Commissioner, thank you. I think we've all heard a sentiment, and I think you've heard from the sponsors of the bill, the commissioner. There is a commitment in this room to get it right. And we're going to do it. And I think, Commissioner, what you just said, Commissioner, was right. This is not about what the department wants. This is about ultimately the users, okay? We are the hunters and fishermen out there, and it's about what we want. And I say we because that is me, and that's probably everybody, almost everybody in this room, if I had to guess. And I think that's the attitude we need to take is what are we adding to the resource? What are the additional things and capacity that the Commissioner mentioned that we can increase to make sure that the quality in Georgia not only stays where it's at, but we increase the quality of the experience of the hunters and anglers out there. And so that's the commitment I've made, and I want to make sure that we're leading this. This committee's leading it, and the subcommittee is following that edict. So with that, I'm going to one last word, Chairman Nimmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You really don't want me to have it, do you?
No, there's too many buttons up here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just, if it's okay, the folks that have came up and spoke either for or in careful opposition of this House bill, if you would, I would just like a simple letter from you or your agency, organization, whatever it may be, expressing your concern or your support of this bill. And then I can't stress enough that I'm in room 113 of the Capitol. This is going to go through a process, and we're on day 14, I believe, today. While the days are clicking off quick, we're not going to rush it. Chairman Knight's been clear about that, and I've been clear about it. The department has been clear about the fact they don't want to rush it, but we've got to work. So let's not sit idle and come up late with a concern. I do think, Mr. Less, one thing that I came into my first session in 11 was nobody had money through the economic downturn of this nation, and I think everybody took a lot of hits and a lot of cuts. I heard from about every agency up here and organization that was funded out of a general fund. Not blaming it a prior administration or anything. It just some people have roles in the times that they're elected. And Representative Donahue and I were sitting here talking about, we took a rainy day fund down to less than $200 million from above $1 billion during the economic downturn. So money's not going back where we had hoped for them to go prior to a lot of our tenures in here. We can't foresee the economic future, but we can make plans to make sure that we've got revenue to preserve what's in front of us. And I think that's what we need to just stay focused on, and I want to be able to take something back to our people and be proud of it, because right now they're proud that we're talking about it, I can tell you. I've heard from them, and they're excited that we're having this conversation. So, again, please bring your information to me, because I plan on working this thing as fast as the chairman lets us have committee meetings and hearing from the committee and the stakeholders at large. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'll echo what Chairman Nimmer said. Not only if and I apologize, we had a sign-up sheet. Not everybody signed up. I tried to get names as you came up, but put your name up here. And the other thing is I want contacts, because I want our groups, I want our hunters and fishermen, all of our conservation partners out there. I want to make sure you know every subcommittee meeting, when it is, and I would like for your participation. I mean, again, quite frankly, please be here. And again, it's about our hunters and fishermen. With that, I'm looking at, and we'll wait for the official notice, but I'm going to try to see what I can do Thursday to start the subcommittee process. But again, if we can make sure we got a room. With that, I want to name the subcommittee. Representative Bruce Broderick, Representative Jimmy Pruitt, John Corbett, Emery Donahue, Dominique Laricchia, Chairman McCall. Mr. Nimmer, you're carrying the bill, so I'm not sure you need to, but you can't play two roles. Chairman Shaw, Representative Steve Tarvin, and Al Williams. That is going to be the subcommittee that we're going to put this in. And again, we're going to work this, and I ask for all of your participation. We're going to get this right, guys. With that, I appreciate today's meeting, and we'll try to set up that subcommittee meeting very quick.
Can you repeat that as we get?
The budget office. All right, we're going to do Representative Bruce Broderick, Jimmy Pruitt, John Corbett, Emery Donahue, Dominique Laricchia, Tom McCall, Jason Shaw, Steve Tarvin, Al Williams. With that, we're adjourned.